Hello everybody, it is Elagatua, and I am back with another combo map review, replay review for the map Misty, and I will be going over my first round in the third Smacky Cup, which is the Fog tournament on Advanced Wars by Web. This map is very interesting and there is a lot to talk about. So I'm just going to get into the map review section of this without further ado. So, Misty. This is what we call a semi-fog or a spy map. And the reason that we call it that is because we have these little recons up here in the corner. And these recons have vision of the other player's base. And they can also move onto the comm tower here to get vision of the airport, and also this base is always in vision. So whenever you hear about like a spy map or semi-fog, basically it is a map where your opponent has some sort of pre-deployed vehicle or the ability to deploy a vehicle that can see the deploys of the other player. Probably not all of their bases, but some of their bases. Now, with that being said, once this recon gets killed, and it can be taken out by an artillery, because with this base here, an artillery on either of these tiles or an artillery on either of these tiles can hit the recon no matter what. There's nowhere that it can really escape to. So while this recon is alive, the other player is going to have vision of a lot of the deploys of the player whose bases are over here. And that's not the only thing that's interesting about this map, but that's certainly the thing that jumps out at the beginning. Another thing that's interesting about this map is we have landers. And you'll notice right away that these landers are not symmetrical. So player 1's lander is actually farther up here than player 2's lander. And so this is to prevent player 1 from being able to get infantry into this area on the second turn. But we'll get more into that later. But the idea here is that the route to this side of the map from player 1 and this side of the map from player 2, it's very convoluted. So player 1, coming from this factory, is going to have to go all the way kind of around here to get all the way down to this area of the map. And likewise, player 2 is going to have to go all the way up this way. So the lander gives a more direct route to get units from this base up here and from this base down here. That being said, if you look at where the lander can actually drop units off, there's this tile, and maybe even this tile that are options. And you'll notice that with all these tiles, there's actually only one square to unload into. So this lander, even though the lander can technically hold 2 units, it's going to be pretty limited in how many units it can actually ferry over, because it can only unload onto one square at a time. So really what's going to be happening is, as you build units from this base, especially if they're vehicles, you're really only going to be able to use the lander every other turn to ferry 1 unit over. So that creates a pretty interesting dynamic where you have to be choosy about what you're actually going to bring over, and also what are you going to do with those other turns, because you can kind of quickly bring 1 unit over, but then the other turns, some units going to have to go, the long way around. So choosing your deploys based on kind of where your lander's positioned is pretty important. Another thing to consider with the lander is that if you kill this spy, you have a comm tower up here. So how are you going to get an infantry up to the comm tower when you've killed the spy? One option that you can do is you can bring the lander all the way up here. But if you do that, then obviously that's going to slow down your deploy of units to this corner because the lander is not there. The lander's up here. So there's a lot of different choices that you can make when it comes to the lander and how much you're going to focus on this side of the map and this side of the map. But that's not all. This map has so many things to talk about, so I apologize for spending so much time on this. But we got more to talk about. So let's talk about this black boat. So this black boat is pre-deployed onto your opponent's side of the map, and it is blocking an airport. And so if you will look at the bases here, the fastest way to get over to this side of the map is through this passageway, right? Because of these mountains. So if we want to get like over here into this corner and we don't kill the black boat, we've kind of got to go around the mountains, which is pretty inefficient. So what ends up happening is you're going to want to kill this black boat very quickly, not only to unlock the airport, which is very forward positioned and is a very fast way to project power onto this side of the map, but just to unlock an efficient route to fight over here. So if you'll notice what's happening here, there's a lot of priorities on the map that open up very early. We can try to kill the spy. We can try to kill the black boat. We can use landers to ferry units down to here. And we can also try to harass. So there's a lot of competing priorities, and that makes this map very interesting because there's just a lot of different ways that you can commit to and a lot of different strategies that you can prioritize. One last thing, we have a lander on our HQ here. And actually we have 2 HQs. So this lander is really useful because this lander can be moved off and it can be a blocker. Not only is it going to block the HQ in the early game, but if there's fighting that's going to be happening in this area, which tends to happen, this lander can be moved, and landers are just very slow to kill. They're a great defensive unit. You don't really want to be attacking into them, and they really require artillery to be able to remove efficiently. So this lander is something that you're going to want to consider moving off the HQ to be in the way and to protect more valuable units behind. And as we get into my replay review, that's something that we will see more of. Okay, one last thing when we break down unique features of this map. So because there are 2 HQs, certainly this means that there's 2 things that you can try to cap to end the game, but that's not really the major significance. The major significance of the 2 HQs is there is a higher starting income than usual because you have an extra base, or not an extra base, sorry, an extra property. And so you're starting with 4,000 income when oftentimes maps would start with 3,000, or which would just be like your 2 bases and then an HQ, which would be for 3,000. But this map we're starting with 4,000. And so what this means is that early recon plays are more viable because you just have the funds to build a recon earlier than you would normally. You can do day 2 recon builds on this map, and I've pulled up an old Starflash replay to show you that this is something that, I mean, if you know Starflash, it isn't really a surprise that you see a recon built the first day it's possible, right? But on day 2, like, you're going to have 6,000 funds. And so building a day 2 recon is a thing that is possible. And I think there's, I don't know if it's this replay. It's not this replay. It's this replay where you even have enough funds to go day 2 recon and day 3 recon. Okay, so early aggression is much more possible on this map because you have that extra HQ generating funds for you early, and that gives you the ability to build more recons more aggressively. Now let's talk about how this map tends to play out. I watched a bunch of replays in preparation for my first round match, just to kind of get a feel for how the map usually goes. And there's a lot of contested properties on this map, actually. So all 3 of these properties tend to be pretty contested. This one is like sort of contested. These 2, they're not really super contestable once they're captured, but they are definitely available for fighting over. And then these. Okay, so that's kind of how I would split the map. It's pretty intuitive for the most part, but the thing that is very important to consider on this map is the flow of the map is going to change at about day 8 or so, because what's going to happen is the player 1 is up here in the top right corner, and player 1 is blocked from this side of the map by the black boat, and it's very inefficient for player 1 to try and contest stuff over here with like tanks and stuff. Like, sure, you can recon harass, but beyond that, it's very inefficient because the shortest path over here is blocked by the black boat. And additionally, you got this spy. So if any vehicles like come out of this factory or this factory, then player 2 is going to know. So for a while, this area, sorry, more specifically, this area is going to belong to player 2. And likewise, this area is going to belong to player 1 for the same reason, because you can get units up here very quickly with the lander and with this lander. However, around day 7 or 8, player 1 and player 2 are going to have artillery. They're going to knock out this black boat. And then what's going to happen is all of a sudden, this airport is going to be available, and then units are going to stream this way very quickly. There's no force blocking. And all of a sudden, where player 1 was pretty safe over here, and player 2 is pretty safe over here, now the dynamic flips. And now actually it's easier for the other player to project power. And so what's going to happen is oftentimes these sides are going to flip. And so that creates a really interesting dynamic, because you can choose to deal with that multiple ways. You can try to delay your opponent from flipping those properties as long as possible. You can hard commit to the other side and try to like wipe everything out and take, like, you can take full control over kind of everything up here as player 1 and kind of fight to the bridge, so to speak. That's an option that you can do. You can try to play for the middle and then see where your opponent commits and try to work the pivots. So there's a lot of different options. And I think this map is really cool because of that. And then one last thing is, we touched on this earlier, prioritization. So in what order are you going to kill the black boat? When are you going to choose to try and commit to the recon, to invest in artillery to kill that? Or you can even invest in a copter from here. And then how are you going to get an infantry to the comm tower? Your options being committing the lander for a while to get an infantry up to the comm tower, or you can actually invest in a T-copter from the airport here to go up there. But then obviously that's another investment. And keep in mind, you're already having to invest in artillery to kill this guy. You're going to have to invest in artillery to kill this guy. And if you're going to invest in a T-copter to get an infantry up here, that's like a whole lot of investments. And these are investments that your opponent likely is going to be able to see with the spy. And if you invest too heavily in taking out all of these kind of nice to have objectives, and your opponent spams recons out on the map and harasses you into the ground, then you're going to end up behind. So there's this balance between investing in harass and investing in defense and then investing in the other objectives. So there's a lot of competing priorities, and that's why I think this map is so cool. There's just a lot of different ways that you can think about it. You can approach the different priorities. but also you're going to get some information about how your opponent is prioritizing as well, because you have that spy. And so you're going to get some decent information about how your opponent is thinking about the map in real time. So strategies include, there's some different ways that you can approach this. I'm not going to go into all of them in a ton of depth. I'm just going to kind of lay them out at a high level, and we're not going to necessarily go into replays for every single different approach. But one strategy is you can just rush the objectives here. So you can go like first artillery here, and then you can commit the lander up here to try and get the comm tower down, or you can build a T-copter and just focus on that. So that's a very passive way to play, but it is an option. Another way to play is you can play the aggro option. This is kind of what Starflash likes to do, which is day 2 or day 3 recon to get over here as quickly as possible. One note about this is that generally speaking, early aggro plays are better for player 1 than they are for player 2, just because of the income curve. I don't really have time to go too deep into this, but just the way that the income curve works out and the timings and all that, player 1 has more aggro options available than player 2, but player 2 has better curves, income curves, for more passive plays that involve delayed vehicles or earlier artillery, less harassment, things like that. So that's just something to keep in mind. As player 2, you might anticipate getting harassed more, and you might need to consider watching out for that day 2 recon, because the day 2 recon can really harass any infantry that tries to do any early captures in this corner. So that is another option that you can do. You can kind of get early recons to prevent your opponent from taking this corner as much as possible, and then that will buy you time for when you finally bust down this black boat, and then you can kind of clean everything up over here. The risk, though, is that if you do that, then you're also putting your forces over here at risk at the same time. So you can be aggressive, but it's also at a cost of defending your parts of the map where you're trying to cap more aggressively. And then there's anywhere in between, right? Like you can commit to some harass, you can play a little more defensively, you can try to focus on building units from this base, like your vehicles, so that your opponent doesn't know exactly how you're deploying. These are all viable options. So I know that may not necessarily give you too much of an idea of how you want to approach a match on this map, but there's just a lot of choices, and you're going to have to play it by feel, and you'll have some information on what your opponent is doing, because you're going to be moving the recon back and forth from this comm tower to get vision of what's coming from this base when the infantry shows up at the airport, and then anything that deploys from the airport as well. You'll be able to see that. Okay. The Smacky Cup round 1 is tier 4. So I'm not going to focus on the other tier COs. I'm just going to focus on what the CO pick should be for tier 4. Don't think Sammy was an option in the tournament. I don't know if Sammy would be good necessarily. Otherwise, maybe. But in my opinion, this is essentially only a Jake map. You can maybe make an argument for Adder, but even I think it's so clearly a Jake map that really anything else is very bold. And there's a few reasons for that, so let's talk about them. So the first thing, when you're evaluating like whether something is a Jake map versus a Jess map especially, one thing to look at is where are the airports? So how much airport play is there going to be? And with these airports, first of all, there's 2 of them, and they're pretty well located. They're located in a way where building units from the airport is going to get you units to the front line very quickly. So a copter from here, like that's really, really fast to get copters into the battle. So the more useful the airport is, the better Jake is going to be, because Jake's copters can take advantage of the planes buff, and Jess's copters have a slight attack debuff. So that's one point in favor of Jake. Another thing to look at is, what is the terrain like around the cities that are going to be contested? So we looked at our contested cities. So these 2 cities here have 3 plains tiles around them, which means that, generally speaking, Jake infantry are going to get... They're going to have really good math to be able to deny that. Because remember, 2 infantry with plus 20 attack, guaranteed denial of a capping infantry on that city. And even if only one of the infantry has a plus 20 buff, it still brings the odds of clearing the infantry in 2 hits to like 70% or something like that. And if you just have plus 10, then I think it's something around like 33% or something like that. So it's pretty substantial increase in your odds of clearing the infantry off with 2 units, which is very helpful. And if you look at these cities as well, especially these 2, like these 2 are kind of the prime contested cities. So there's 2 plains here and 3 plains here. So a lot of your contested cities have a lot of plains, and so that's going to benefit Jake, because that's going to make infantry really good at clearing other capping infantry, and you won't have to rely on vehicles to assist you in clearing off infantry. So Jake, I think, is substantially better than Jess because of all those reasons. You could make an argument for Adder, because Adder is going to get a movement bonus from the copters. And again, we talked about copters being good just based on the layout of the airports. I think this is fine. I don't think it matters so much, but to me, the infantry getting buffed on the plains around the contested cities, to me, that's more important than the extra movement on the copters. But that's just me. I think you can probably play Adder, and I think in general, tier 4, more than any other tier, is going to be settled by the tactics and the quality of the players, more so than the CO pick. All the COs are more or less viable, and it's pretty rare that the CO pick itself is going to be the single thing that decides the game, because they're all very similar power levels. So I think it's a pretty clear Jake pick, and if you've looked through the tournament and you've seen the picks that have happened, you see a lot of Jake, and it's no accident that that's the case. So I think we've talked about this map long enough. Let's get into the game. So get a drink of water. We're doing this in one take. All right, let's get in here. This is me against Kardel. I'm going to change the colors here. So we got orange and blue. There are the colors I like to go with, just to keep things differentiated. And let's get into this. So, whoops, I just got to skip past this turn. So we'll look very briefly at kind of the first turn or two, and then we'll switch into vision for just me. But keep in mind that I can actually, well, let's check out my vision, right? Because we got the spy thing going on. So, right, so you can see my vision. So I'm able to see the infantry here. I don't see the lander going because it's already deployed kind of up here. And I'm going to have vision of this airport. And so you're going to see me in a few turns start to do the recon shuffle as we go back and forth to try and get vision to see when the airport gets capped and what is being built out of this bottom base. And we're especially looking for, when does the artillery show up? That's really what we want to catch from this bottom base here. So this is what we would expect, because this infantry needs to go to the base here, and mine will do the same. That's just the fastest path there. Move my lander in preparation to bring an infantry over. And so I chose not to go with the day 2 recon here because if I do the day 2 recon, then I don't have this infantry, and I want to have this infantry to go get the airport, and then this day 2 infantry to go into the lander to go over here. And if I don't have this day 2 infantry, then it kind of mucks it up a little bit. So there's kind of a price. If you're going to go for that really hyper-aggressive day 2 recon, then it's going to also slow down your cap phase. Either you're going to have the airport delayed, or you're going to have a turn delay in getting down an infantry to this area to start capping all that stuff. Okay, so one thing you should definitely not do is bonk your infantry into the black boat. So don't do that. Bonk. So yeah, just don't forget that there's a black boat there. I promise this game gets better, but that was kind of the low point of the game. So just something to keep in mind. And with that, I think we've seen enough of the full board. So we're going to switch this into just my vision now. But you can still see, like, I'm aware that that happened because the black boat is giving me vision. And I see that we got another infantry there. And now it is time for my day 3 recon. So I don't often do early recons. But on this map, the income curve for player 1 kind of forces you into it a little bit. There's just not a whole lot of really good greedy builds on this map. So you just kind of have to listen to how the map wants you to play it. And for me, that was doing a day 3 recon. Additionally, I'm moving this recon over because I want to see whether the infantry comes down onto this airport, because we are also going to be looking for that day 2 recon from our opponent. And if there's not an infantry that shows up on that airport, then we need to worry about a day 2 recon. But we do see the infantry come down, so we don't need to be worried about anything too substantial yet. So everything seems normal so far. So we're just going to continue with our normal plan. And we have enough income now to do artillery, infantry. So since we don't anticipate like a really early harass down here because we saw the infantry show up here, it's fine to go with a more greedy approach, and we want to start clearing off this black boat. And I think this is the first objective. It's more important than clearing off the spy recon, because oops, I jump scared. This is income, but this is also access to this side of the map. And the sooner we cut off and contest this area, the less income we're going to be conceding to our opponent. So getting that is a real priority. One thing that we did see, we haven't seen any vehicles. So we could have seen an artillery here, but we didn't. So that suggests that there's a vehicle that either was built here or is going to be built there next turn. Okay, and we see another infantry here. So what this means, so we because we didn't see the artillery here, I'm assuming there is a tank being built up here to get ferried up here to guard against harass, because my opponent definitely has funds for a vehicle, but we haven't seen it. So, and they should have had enough money for a tank as well. I believe they could have built a recon and also and also an artillery by this point. So I'm assuming that there's a tank coming, and so that's going to affect how I use this recon. If I expect a tank to be up here, then this recon can't really harass very well. It's likely to just get picked off. So I'm going to change how I use this recon, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But for now, I'm just going to run over there for some scouting. We're getting our artillery in position. And we're getting our infantry in position as well. So one interesting thing about having the infantry here, so we can go here very quickly, but keep in mind that we can also go here very quickly or here. So there's, or even down here. So there's these set of properties that are 2 moves away from this square, and they're all pretty juicy. So I think there's room for some early aggressive caps, and especially because I think that there is a tank going to be up here. If there's a tank over here, then there's no way there's going to be a recon over here. So I can actually be as greedy as I want to be, assuming that I'm right about the tank. So this is a good opportunity to take advantage of that. We don't know for sure, but anything else is kind of inefficient for my opponent. And now we see the artillery from this base. This is a little bit late, but really the only things that could allow this to be the case, there could be double recon from this base, which is, it's possible. If there's double recon from this base, then probably one recon is going to get landered up to this side, and then the other recon is going to go across this way. And so what I'm thinking now is I want to see if I can catch vision of the recon going over here to harass, if there is in fact a double recon build. And if this recon is going over this way, it's going to take this pathing kind of through here, you know, this way, right? Because that's where all the roads are, probably across the HQ. So what I can do is I can put my recon here, and then I will get vision if something comes across this way. And if nothing comes across that way, then I can probably assume that there's a tank up here, right? So even though we built this day 3 recon, we're not going to use it for harass. We're going to try and use it to be as aggressive as possible with our infantry captures, since we have some kind of read on what we think the opponent's doing. I don't see anything down there, but that's fine. We're really expecting to either see something go across here or nothing. And we know what both of those situations would mean. We take a shot at the lander. We do some cap skipping here. I could have gotten this base, but actually we want this infantry. I may even skip this again next turn, because like this guy could go here, and then kind of getting into the mid properties like these as quickly as possible limits the ability of your opponent to harass. We've kind of talked about that in some other videos. Okay, so you can kind of copy my cap phase if you want, or if you don't want to, that's fine too. I'm not going to go over it too much in detail, but just in general, I'm trying to get to those mid properties as quickly as I can, and I don't mind skipping a cap or two to try and consolidate those as quickly as possible. And additionally, we're going to get tank here. We don't care if he sees it. He's going to see it. We want to potentially get rid of this black boat one turn earlier so that we can get over here as quickly as possible. So there's a roll next turn for whether this artillery will be able to fully clear the black boat. And so if it clears it in 2 hits, that's great. Then we can just move the tank out further. Otherwise, this tank will come finish off the black boat. Putting this infantry here gives us the option to either go here or here, depending on what we see. we can kind of get an idea of where the recon will end up if we see a recon go through this way. And so we'll decide like which property to go for depending on what we think our opponent has vision of. So we don't see a whole lot, but we're going to start off by doing our spy. So we see a tank come out here. So it seems like everything is kind of mirrored for the most part, other than the possibility of like probably a tank being here, and then we have the recon. And then I got a recon here as well. Just on a map like this, it's just really good to have lots of recons. Helps you make good decisions, good for harassing if the opportunity arises. These just recons, really good units. We get a little boost there. And now we didn't see a recon come through this way, so we're pretty confident like there's got to be a tank up here. Like that seems pretty likely. The fact that we didn't see anything means that we're very likely safe down here. We've seen all the units coming out here. We know there's an artillery. Know there's a tank, so we can try to consolidate these second level properties. But also, if there's a tank up here, then these middle properties are likely going to be undetected. So I want to go for those. Those are, if we can get those properties, it's almost guaranteed that we will be able to hang on to them for the entire game because Jake is so good at clearing infantry off of those tiles. So those are like really high priority if we can get them. I'm just being opportunistic. And now we've got this lander up here. We left it on the HQ as long as possible, but we've got this infantry here. So this infantry is going to come down and get this property. This guy will go in the lander and give me another infantry in this area to capture this stuff as soon as possible. And I could have gone for this property earlier, but this is a safe city, and these are all likely to be contested. Additionally, I want to get this city very quickly so that this guy can go down here and then get into this corner. There's two mountains that are blocking access to this city. So it's basically infantry and air units only. And whoever gets to that corner basically is going to get that city. So I know that my opponent is going to be clearing off this black boat for the next 2 turns. So I should be able to get down here in enough time to get that city. And that city is one of those cities where you're going to get it for a while and then you're just going to lose it because you can't really defend it as soon as this black boat is gone. But at least we can hold on to it for a few turns and try to delay as long as possible our opponent from stealing it away from us. And likewise, now that this black boat is gone, we too want to take over that corner. One other thing I should mention, we got lucky with the roll there, and so that allowed our tank to get out on the map a little further. That being said, we don't really have anything to accomplish much with this tank. He's kind of just there to protect our caps and nothing else, because we don't really have vision to do any aggressive stuff. And we think that there's like a tank up here, and we don't want to get our tank first hit by another tank. That would be really bad, so we can just kind of chill. Oh, and I've built my artillery to start dealing with the spy, and my opponent is going to do the same thing. It's a pretty passive game so far, but because of my opener and also my opponent's thinking that there's like a tank up here, it's kind of led to a more passive game. But if you see different things with the spy, your experience may vary. That's the whole point of the spy. So we didn't see any harassment last turn, which is great because we did some pretty aggressive caps. So that's what we wanted to see. And just using our recons for vision, staying on our side of the map, putting our infantry in position for some greedy caps if we can. Just nice and safe, nothing exciting. And we build a copter here. Excuse me. This copter, my opponent might think that this is going to go up here. But actually, I want to get this copter out on the map as soon as possible. Because if we send the copter up here to finish the recon in one turn, well, first of all, it doesn't really accomplish anything for me because my lander is not in position to get up here. Additionally, my income next turn, it's I don't really want to be able to buy a T-copter because I need to build a recon from this factory in order to see the spy to kill it. So the math is just not going to really work out. So it's not important for me to clear this recon off in one turn. It's more important for me to get out on the map because I can either send it this way or I can send it this way. And it's very hard for my opponent to build anti-air to send to both directions. So my opponent is not going to know where it ends up going. And that's the point. It can kind of be anywhere. It's hard to defend against. And my opponent knows about it. And hopefully that will make my opponent play a little more passively. No, I don't actually need to make the recon until next turn. Because it will give me the vision immediately. So I can get away with another infantry this turn. So my black boat's gone. And now we start to see some units get out on the map. And there's a recon to see my recon. And my opponent is also building a copter as well. That's good information. I'll be very interested to see whether my opponent sends this copter down here. Because if that's the case, then I know that this copter is going to be like in the far corner of the map, and it's going to be like 2 turns before it can even get anywhere where it could fight. So I really think my opponent needs to match me and send it out on the map to force me to be a little more passive rather than try to be aggressive in clearing out the spy. But that's my opponent's choice to make. We'll see what happens. And we see a really crazy move here. So a recon has just showed up like within one move of my base to hit an artillery. So I was not expecting this. It's okay. I can understand the temptation, right? So like clearly there was a recon in these woods. So first of all, what that means is likely there's no tank. And that I was wrong about assuming that there was a tank up there, which is kind of confusing. But I mean, it is what it is, right? Like we know there's a recon there now. So in terms of kind of financial damage, right? So artilleries are 6,000. This is 2/5 of an artillery. So that's about 2,400 in damage. Recon costs 4,000. So the recon hasn't done its worth in money yet. But at the same time, I can't kill the recon this turn. I only have 1 tank. And actually, 1, 2, 3, 4. I can't get this stinking recon up all the way to help my tank finish off the recon. So that's kind of annoying. But at the same time, this recon is so deep in my territory that it's going to die no matter what. And so we can basically trap it from escaping. And net, it's going to be good for me because even though maybe it ends up doing like equal amount of damage in terms of economy, but the reality is that I can repair this artillery. And artilleries are good units to repair because when they're sitting on a city, they can still give you value by controlling space. But if this recon dies, it's not giving you any value. It's -1 unit. And also, that's your vision for this whole corner that is going to go away. So it's going to have to be replaced. Otherwise, you're not going to have aggressive options. That being said, it does force me to kind of delay pushing out into this area. But I wasn't really looking to do that anyway. It's a little bit unlucky here. I was thinking about moving the infantry up here to see if the recon was on this square versus this square. And if that's the case, I could have I could have avoided buying the recon, and then I would have had enough money for a T-Copter this turn. Instead, I don't really have enough money for a T-Copter this turn without sacrificing a tank buy. So it's a little bit unfortunate. I kind of lost a 50-50 there, but I played it safe. So it is what it is. But our cap phase is really nice now. Getting to this tile quickly means I can actually go down here and try to steal this as well, and that will give me both middle cities if my opponent does not harass me. So that's really good. Seeing all this infantry here is not great. I might have been too slow to get both of these cities. So I'm probably gonna give up on this one because it could get denied very easily, and we'll just focus on getting everything else. But getting both of the middle cities, if I can get that, is more than worth it. I will sacrifice this city for this city any day of the week. So what we do here is we actually give up on the cap of the airport for one turn, and we move him here. And this actually doesn't cost me money in the long run, because even though I'm not getting this next turn, I'm going to end up getting this city one turn faster. So I'm deferring 1,000 income for a few turns, but the total amount of money that I'm going to get is the same. And doing this actually prevents this recon from escaping. I've moved this recon back instead of going here, just because I know that the tank is going to be in this line. But the tank that was killing the black boat here doesn't have enough movement to... well, it can get into these forests, but there's not going to be any vision to basically to kill this, most likely. So I think certainly doing this is safer. I could put the recon here and it would make this cap safe, but I really just don't want to get my recon hit by the tank, because you look at what I've got in this area. It's basically just infantry. I'm putting all my power over here, and so we're just going to commit hard to that, and we're going to take the middle, and then we're going to take this side, and then we're going to have an advantage because of that. And we might defend this side with infantry for now, but we're not going to commit hard to that. So there's no reason to allow my opponent to get a free hit on a vehicle when I'm not even planning on defending that side very hard. Oops, I skipped. I messed everything up here. We'll zoom ahead back where we were. Okay. And then, yeah, so we're pushing everything over here. Path to victory is center control, take this side. If we do that, we're going to have more properties and we're going to be in a good shape. And I can actually move this artillery here. This is a little bit greedy, but I want to repair the artillery as quickly as possible. And this recon still can't escape because it's got 1, 2. So both of these are planes. And so then 3 is like the fastest move. So the fastest way out is here, and then it can either get to like here, this tile, or this tile, right? So this is as far as it can get, and it's still going to be easy for me to clean up no matter what. So I'd rather just get my artillery repaired as quickly as possible. It's better to do that than to try and like prevent the recon from moving an inch. So again, my posture, very defensive over here. And you'll see, so the lander is blocking access to here. So my opponent is really not going to want to attack the lander. That will give me free charge, and it's probably not going to do much damage anyway, because tanks barely scratch landers at all. And the lander is going to disincentivize my opponent from coming into this area, even though the defense of these shoals is very low. So that's how you should be using the lander. So my opponent does bring the copter down here, so that's good to know. That means that I kind of know the timing of when the copters are going to start showing up here. It's going to be in like 2 or 3 turns. But before that, I'm going to be safe. So the recon takes another pot shot at the artillery, and ultimately it's like half of artillery. That's like 3,000 of damage. Recon's worth 4,000. But at the end of the day, the recon's gone. The artillery's still there. This is a positive trade for me, and I wouldn't recommend being this aggressive with your recons, even though there was a pretty good opportunity to slow me down. You want your recons alive. We see a lot of stuff with the recon here. So we see that an infantry snuck in here, and then the tank really boldly came into these woods here, but he didn't have vision, so he couldn't interrupt the cap. So that's great. That's mission accomplished. Because we could have tried to do this city or this city, and now we know, like, if we had taken this city, this infantry would have gotten vision, and then this tank would have interrupted. So we made the right choice to go for this one. And we see all this infantry down here. So we know that our opponent is probably trying to dominate this side of the map as well, which is kind of the opposite of what I'm trying to do. My vehicles are going over here. So I need to be pretty defensive. That being said, we know the timing of the air units because we saw the copter down here. So now I do have an opportunity now to bring this copter down here and defend with the copter, because I know that there's almost certainly not going to be any anti-air units down here, especially when it comes to like protecting this cap, right? I can't, this city is lost to me. This city is not really defendable. I'm going to try to take the corner. This city's mine. But in terms of like defending this city, this copter can actually probably defend it for at least a little bit. To finish off the recon, and we're just continuing to cap this side now. We're going to dominate this side, and we did get this center property, so that was really good. So we accomplished our objective of getting both center properties, and now these are going to be very easy to defend just with infantry. And now we're getting ready to set up an attack over here on this side. So this recon is a little bit exposed, but we've got this square is covered by the artillery. This tile is covered by 2 tanks. This artillery is a little bit vulnerable, but anything that comes in to attack the artillery is covered by the tanks and the recon. So, and we already see a tank down here. So any sort of attack by my opponent on this area is going to get overwhelmed and crushed. So it's okay to basically leave an empty path to the artillery. That's my point. Even if the artillery gets attacked, it's still going to end up being good for me. I bring this infantry down, thinking maybe I can delay a cap on this by 1 turn. And if not, I always have the opportunity to retreat back. And again, we're not planning on fighting here. We don't want to fight here. We've got like our powers over here. We don't really want to fight here. But we are going to put our copter in a position where we can cover both. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So this copter is covering this artillery, and it's also covering this property. And those are the 2 most likely places to get attacked. So having copters in the middle, it's really strong. I can choose either way. It depends on what my opponent wants to do, but we've got both options covered. And I've got my T-copter up here to go for this comm tower finally. Okay. So tank took a shot on this infantry. This is getting capped now. This infantry gets cleared. We see the artillery come up here. We assume that it's going to be left on this tile here because that's going to cover the cap here, and that will cover the tank here. So even though we don't see it, we can assume where it is. And so that means that this infantry is probably going to end up here. So there's probably an infantry here, here, artillery here, tank here. And then capping this city as well. So we definitely are going to defend that city. After all, that's why we've been pulling all these units back, so that we have fresh units to be able to come in and defend. There is absolutely no way that this is going to get capped. We are really strong over there. We have no fear. We are going to be... that's my city. That's not his city. And this is really passive, actually. I was kind of surprised that both of these guys came down here, because having them here, I can't really extend into this. It's too dangerous. So having them there is actually a pretty good threat on like the city and the city. But now that they're here, they're actually a threat on nothing at all. I mean, sure, they can push this way eventually, but now I know like there's no way this city is in danger at all. So I don't need to care about that. Okay. So obviously we are going to be taking this out because we want to use this recon to see what's going on in this corner. And we were never going to let him get that city. We'd love to delay the fight a little bit because we want to get our comm tower before we fight if we can. But we'll see how it plays out. And when I say fight, I mean like big vehicle fights. So we see everything with the recon, and we see that the formation was what we expected. And remember, there's a tank in here. Even though this recon seems like it could get annihilated by the tank really easily, we've got a plan for that. And so we're actually going to use the copter to hit this infantry. We could have done a variation on this where we put an infantry here or here to, I think it would have had to have been here. Because you can basically clear this and then you can lander an infantry over to here. You bring the lander down to reveal the tank. But if you do that, then we leave an infantry basically as fodder for the artillery. And I don't actually think it's super valuable to get the copter hit on the tank this turn. Having the copter there already prevents my opponent from being able to attack any further here. So just clearing out the infantry for free is a pretty good compromise. And again, we're using this lander as the cornerstone of our defense here. It's very... like, what is my opponent going to do? Are they going to send a bunch of vehicles onto these shoals to attack my infantry? That's really risky. And additionally, like, we know that there's probably nothing to deal with the copter. Putting anything attacking the recon is very dangerous because there could be artillery here. There's already a copter here. And it's a very good defensive position. So... and we're going to start to defend this side. Our original plan was to send everything over this way, but it seems like there's very little here. Like, we haven't seen much with this recon. So it may just be enough to push with this recon and these infantry and just kind of clear everything out. And then we can actually pull everything down here and defend this side with everything and try to stall this out. So again, we're kind of seeing where we think the opponent is strong. We think the opponent is sending everything down here and nothing up here. So we're adjusting to what we see. So we can just push with like this. And now we're going to shift the tanks down this way. This positioning is very specific. Again, we control the middle, so we get this pivot. This is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So this tank is covering the artillery. Should there be like a tank here and a recon here, something like that, we have the option to shift back this way. But also, if that doesn't happen, we will continue to shift here where we think the fight's going to happen. And we're pulling this infantry back because we're kind of like, we're ready to receive an attack over here. Like if an infantry kind of shows up here, we're ready to counterattack it. And we know we can't really defend this. If we leave the infantry here, he's going to die. So again, sometimes you just got to know when to pull back. Okay, and we get an anti-air here. We know that the copter that we saw down here a few turns ago, I didn't really spell out the timing, but basically after my opponent's next turn, that copter is going to be in this area, and so we need to start having anti-air so that we can fight against that. This is the last turn that we're safe. So I calculated it out that this copter basically is safe for this turn, but after this turn, it's not safe anymore. We see, I mean, it's really good information. So we can learn a lot about what our opponent is thinking just by how they're positioning their units. So artillery back in the woods. This is pretty passive. See this recon come up. Doesn't actually see the artillery, which is pretty nice. And this is, you really should be careful about how you position recons. This is food for tanks, because a tank can come here and there's a chance that that can even one-shot the recon. It's a roll, but with Jake with the planes bonus, that recon is definitely going to die. Even if I don't get the roll to one-shot it, potentially this infantry can come in or this recon can come in. That recon is going to die. So a little bit of fighting on the infantry there, but that's just gonna delay things. And now that's great because that gives my artillery something to do. So we invested in all those recons. We got 3 recons out, which is a pretty good number, and we're seeing so much. And the vision is so valuable. Like, my opponent can't really safely clear the recons out, which is a tremendous boon to me because I can kind of see where my opponent is massing their forces, and where can I attack? Where should I be defensive? I haven't thrown any infantry away for free. It's been pretty good. And again, we don't want to really fight this turn, because next turn we're going to get the comm tower. So we'd really like to avoid fighting into this. And based on the positioning, like, sure, we could kind of yeet into this, but this stuff is far back. It's well positioned. There's not really an opportunity there, so we shouldn't force it. But anyway, so we take our free hit there, and we get lucky with the roll. We were able to clear that recon in one hit. I think that's only like a 25% chance or so to get it in one hit. If we hadn't gotten it, we would have finished it off with this recon. And we don't see anything, which is pretty interesting. And so now I see an opportunity, right? Because I've got this infantry here. And so I can cap this and send this recon into the woods and block access to this property. And potentially steal it, just based on the positioning. So now we see a lot of information. So we see this artillery. This was the artillery that took out the spy originally, and now it has made its way up here. And just like mine is just it's one turn behind in terms of movement, but that's the corresponding artillery there. But fortunately, that is out of range of my stuff, so that's great. And now I know that this infantry is not going to be able to come here to interrupt my cap. And there's a good chance that he's going to bonk into that. which would be pretty sweet. We got infantry on the mountains here, and so we see another copter here. So I think this is the copter that was down in this corner, and it's headed over here. 1, 2, 3, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, so that's 2 moves from there. So that's the same copter. So that's good to know where that is. And that tells me the positioning. First of all, it tells me that this copter did in fact go this way and not this way. And it tells me kind of the line that I need to stay behind so that my stuff is safe. That's really unlucky. I think, I don't know what the roll was, but it was pretty, I think it was like 70 or 80% in my favor, but I don't end up clearing that infantry, so that kind of stinks. But I don't think it's super consequential in the end, but I was really annoyed by that. This stuff is going to die, and I know it's going to die. I'm just hoping to delay losing this city a little longer as I try to reposition everything. This will make more sense in a second. All right, this is a feint. So this is a fake attack. So I'm looking like, oh, you should be scared of me and my stuff. But actually, I'm not going to commit any of my units that are actually valuable. So no copters, no tanks, no artillery. Just infantry and recons playing defense. And the idea is that my counterattack is going to be really strong. And yeah. Big boy. We got the Neo-Tank. And so this is the culmination of my plan. Quick Neo-Tank, get it in the lander, get it down here. And then when the fight happens, I counterattack with the Neo-Tank, and we should be really efficient. We won the cap phase pretty heavily, so it's unlikely that our opponent is going to have their own Neo-Tank. It's much more likely that they're going to have copters, and we can offload it into the forest, so it's a big surprise. Our opponent is going to think that they are strong enough in that corner, and hopefully we're going to kind of lose this fight, and then we're going to retreat and hopefully bait our opponent to kind of fight over here just when the Neo-Tank arrives, just when all the artillery arrive, and we're going to hopefully land a crushing blow. And again, we're staying far back. No anti-air is going to be able to get to there. Got the tanks behind everything. Just a bunch of artillery, a bunch of infantry kind of in a line. And this is the true defense line, right? And again, this tank is bait. Like, there's nothing that's going to make it all the way back to here. And if it does, then we've got like more copters to deal with that. So we see an anti-air show up. That's scary. And we do get the trap on this infantry here. So now that's really great. This guy is going to get that property stolen. Interesting that the tank comes up this way instead of opting to try and hit the city. But this tank has gotten really great value because this tank killed the recon already. And now even though it got first hit, it did 3 HP in retaliation for 5. So this is only like plus 2 HP in favor of my opponent on the tank because it's a 7-5 trade. So it's not really that efficient. So that tank's done great. And the artillery is there, and we see another tank come through. So I'm like, wow, that's a lot of tanks. But at the same time, oh, and we see a copter. See this, and this is a mistake. My opponent probably should not be showing me this copter because this is a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So this is a copter that was built last turn. And so every time I see a copter that was built last turn, I know that a Neo-Tank wasn't built that turn. And every turn that there's not a Neo-Tank on the board means my Neo-Tank is safe to do whatever it wants. And we see another, so this is the copter that was, I think, over here. So again, we knew all this stuff was going to get wrecked pretty hard. That's okay. But both of the recons survive with 1 HP. I don't know if there's any rolls involved with that, but that's pretty good fortune. 1 HP recons, still really valuable. They still give you all the vision. Okay, so we got the comm tower now. So next turn, we're going to be ready to fight. Not this turn, because we still need to get the Neo tank in position. So there, I mean, we see everything, right? Like we see recon, artillery, tank, copter, anti-air, and then tank, artillery, copter. So we really see like the entire army of our opponent. So that's really good information, because if we see everything, it's unlikely that we're going to commit to a fight that is like surprisingly bad, because we know what our opponent has and we know where it is. So our plan for this turn is just retreat. We've got both of these properties, so we're going to flip 2 properties, which is really good. We're outnumbered over here, so we need to back up. And we are extended too far over here, and we want to set the trap. We've got artillery coming, we've got the Neo tank coming. We want to fight next turn. So we're just going to set up in the most defensive position possible. And get ready for a big fight next turn. One other thing I want to mention is the power charge. This is very important. This is another reason why we shouldn't be fighting. My opponent is about 12k charge away from super. What we don't want to do is we don't want to throw in a unit or 2 and do damage to our opponent, and then our opponent having a full bar to block rock yeet everything into my forces here. So not fighting this turn is very good, and if our opponent attacks us, that's going to give us the block rock for us to counterattack with when the Neo tank is ready, when the copters are all there, and when we're in good defensive position. And because of this wall here, so we get the wall, we can actually have our copters pretty far forward, and still there's absolutely no way that any of this stuff is going to be able to break through this to get to the copters. So these copters can cover like a pretty wide range, and still not be exposed. So it's just some nice positioning going on here. Remember, you can put infantry on this river here. And we're using the lander as the cornerstone. So again, we're pretty far back here, but there's absolutely no way that our opponent can attack into this. It's just, there's too many artillery, there's too many tech units, there's too many landers, and there's too many forests. And we retreat up here too. We can put this artillery here. This artillery is basically anticipating that our opponent next turn will clear off this city with the 2 tanks. And we know that there's an infantry here, so this city's probably going to get capped. And if that city gets capped, then this artillery can counterattack the capping infantry for free. And we're pretty certain that this artillery will not get attacked because there's no vision for our opponent. It's a little bit of a sneaky play, but when my opponent will kill this infantry, the tanks will be on these 2 tiles, and so they won't see the artillery. So we're going to start to lose our stuff in the corner. That's to be expected, but also we've set up our infantry over here to be able to take this stuff in the corner. Seen infantry go in the woods here. Again, these 1 HP recons, absolutely priceless information that they're giving me. I think that was this is the infantry coming over here. Let's see where that artillery went. Artillery went somewhere. Okay. So now we've kind of got a standoff here. Not a whole lot happened, but my opponent is making some pretty good decisions, honestly. Taking these cities in the corner and just kind of saying, well, if you want me to stop taking these cities, then you better come at me. and I'm going to be set up to defend against that. And if you do that, then I will counter block rock you and crush your army if you come out of your defensive shell. This is pretty sound tactics by my opponent. And I think this is a pretty commendable way of putting it together after kind of the rocky start that Kardel had, bonking into the black boat in the cap phase. Like, he's kind of come back and put together a pretty good game plan with some solid understanding of the map. The problem is that the rest of the cap phase went really badly for him, and I've had a pretty substantial economic advantage for most of the game. Now that will be going away probably after this turn, because he's going to get these 2 cities, and I'm not going to have this city yet. But that's okay, because we're never going to lose these 2 cities in the middle. And so as long as I can just match whatever he does in this corner and then hold on to the middle, I'm always going to have more cities in the event that it goes really, really long and we end up in a tiebreaker situation or something like that. So that being said, it's a little bit of a pickle for me, because I have the ability to attack down here. Like, I've got all this stuff that could contest this city. But at the same time, if I attack, I am going to get block rocked, because I'm going to give my opponent charge to yeet all of his stuff into me. So this is a really critical turn. And if you are playing along with me at home, I invite you to take a moment and pause the video and just kind of stare at this board and tell me what you would do seeing this state of things. Would you attack? Would you play passive? Something else? There's a whole lot of options, and I chose something interesting, but I'd be interested to see how you would analyze this board from your perspective. So with that being said, I will explain what I did. First thing I want to do is I want to use these 1 HP recons. I want to see everything. And boy, do I see everything. 1 HP recons, really, really good. So this is pretty much what I expected, although there is one more copter here than I expected. So it's pretty clear that my opponent has been investing in a lot of copters, which makes sense because that allows my opponent to also build a lot of infantry. And we saw there was a copter up here as well. So that's 4 copters that are accounted for. And you'll see that we only have 2 here, and we just built one. It kind of makes sense because we invested in a Neo tank instead of copters, but we have a good idea of the comp. And now we will use the other recon. So I will tell you my plan here. My plan is we just got the comm tower the previous turn, and now we have the Neo tank here. I really, 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 really want to use the Neo tank this turn, because even if my opponent block rocks, the Neo tank is kind of untouchable. The only thing that can touch the Neo tank is like having multiple copters on planes attack into it. So my objective here is I want to kill a tank with my Neo tank, and I want my Neo tank to end on a high defense tile, either a forest or a city, so that even if he gets attacked by multiple copters, the high defense is gonna make it so that the copters themselves are vulnerable to counterattack. And you'll see that I've set up my anti-air here so that I can counterattack with against the air units that attack me. So the problem is that my opponent has done a pretty good job of hiding their tanks. We really only see 1 tank. We know that there is an infantry in these woods. And then there's an artillery covering the tank as well. And I definitely need to get rid of that artillery. There's probably more tanks even back here, because we saw at least, I think, another tank in addition to this one earlier on. So the solution to this is we need to power. And this is a very non-traditional Jake play, because generally with Jake, you want to superpower so that you get that extra movement. But in this case, I think this is valuable enough for a number of reasons. One, this will give me the extra range on this artillery so that I can clear this infantry out with the artillery shot and this infantry here. That will get rid of him, and then I can move the Neo tank onto this forest to eat this tank here, and also leave my Neo tank on a higher defense tile. The power also adds some defense to the Neo tank, making it even more resistant to copters, so it's very likely that my Neo tank will be safe next turn to eat more tanks. Furthermore, removing this tank opens up this juicy square, and with the extra planes bonus from power, I can one-shot this artillery with a tank. I guess it's not guaranteed one-shot. I think it's like 80 or 90% one-shot, but regardless, it'll either kill the artillery or it'll bring it down to 1 HP, but either way, it can't threaten the Neo tank, which is all we care about. So, and lastly, I'd love to get rid of this recon, because this recon is the only way that my opponent is seeing my army right now. And I can also remove that in one hit with the additional planes bonus from the power. And there's something else as well, because I want to take this city as soon as possible. And remember, plus 20% attack from 2 infantry on a city infantry will guaranteed kill it. And it doesn't really matter where that plus 20 comes from. And so we've got plus 10 from the comm tower, and now we've got another plus 10 from our CO power. That gets us to plus 20. So that is going to guarantee that these 2 infantry can clear the enemy infantry on this city in 1 turn. And it'll also ensure that one of these infantry stays at full HP to start doing the caps the follow-up turn. So that that's going to let me capture that corner city a lot faster. So for all of those reasons combined, I think that doing the non-traditional play, it's kind of, breaking the rules, so to speak. But for all these reasons, I think that using the superpower here, the regular power is quite strong, and we'll see how this looks at the end of the turn. So first of all, we clear that infantry, we eat the tank, we kill the artillery, and we kill the recon. Even if we lose both of these tanks, they've basically done their job, because they traded even in terms of unit count. They removed a recon, they removed an artillery. It's slightly unfavorable in terms of net worth, but at the same time, their job is basically protecting the Neo tank and making my opponent's block rock very difficult. Because without vision, it's very hard to set up an efficient trade, especially when I'm going to be further back with the majority of my units. So you see, I'm not going to commit my copters, even though I could probably disrupt these caps. I don't need to attack with anything more than what I've attacked with. I'm just going to keep everything else safe, because I know that I'm going to lose these tanks, but nothing can touch the Neo tank, and none of this stuff is valuable. They're just like a bunch of beat up recons and infantry, whatever, who cares? I'm going to retreat everything else on this side. So we don't think there's really any vision over here. And this infantry is probably going to get popped, and we live with that. But again, we're anticipating that we're going to receive a block rock next turn. So we want to be absolutely as safe as possible and lose as little as possible in this next turn. Because after the block rock's over, we're going to lean on the Neo tank, and we're just going to fight our way to victory. So we're setting up a super strong defensive position up here. There's no way, even with block rock, you can't attack into this. 2 artillery, got the lander in the line of fire. There's the woods for one of the artillery, and then the copters are pretty far back, and we know that the copters are out of range. So this artillery here, this anti-air, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So this artillery cannot make it to this this copter, even with block rock. Yeah, and we put the lander in like the absolute most obnoxious place possible. And this is our defense. So again, we're conceding that we're going to lose like this front line of stuff, but this is where all the valuable stuff is, and this Neo tank is untouchable. That's the plan. And all this stuff is just kind of back, out of vision, unlikely to get popped, even with the extra range from block rock. So people often say this with learning languages, but oftentimes you know when you really know a language when you can know how to break the rules of the language and still be understood. Well, this is kind of what it's like for Advanced Wars. We're breaking the rules of Jake Mirror, but that's how we know we understand what we're doing, is because we've got a solid theory of what we're trying to accomplish, and we can break the rules successfully. So now the block rock comes, and let's see how this goes. So we see this anti-air here. So this anti-air means 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So that was an anti-air that was built last turn. And that means that there was not a Neo tank build last turn. So that's another turn that we don't need to worry about our Neo tank getting attacked, because we know that there's no opposing Neo tank. Okay, so we received the yeet, right? So our opponent basically saw the Neo tank, knew you couldn't fight that, and yeeted everything into my defensive position. And you can see that my defensive position was really strong. And now the counterattack is going to be absolutely brutal, because this Neo tank's going to eat something. Both these copters are going to die. Artillery are both going to get shots. There's no way that the city is going to actually fall, because we've got enough infantry in position. We basically won the game at this point, and now it's just a matter of playing it out. 1 HP recon. This is so freaking strong. One thing we do need to worry about is there's a good chance that there was a bomber made last turn. And so we just need to make sure that we don't move our Neo tank within 1 range of the airport. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So the bomber can reach all of these tiles, which actually means that all of these tanks are safe for me to eat this turn, because they are 1 range out of the bomber's range. I'm not going to analyze the tactics here too much. It's pretty straightforward. We're just efficiently killing all the stuff that was overextended. Again, taking really good care of our copters. We cleaned off 2 copters, and we also are keeping both of our copters safe behind a wall of units. There's no way that we're going to lose them. The Neo tank is really exposed, but who cares? Because there's nothing to kill the Neo tank. We saw that there was an anti-air unit made last turn, so that means there's no Neo tank out there, and the bomber cannot be in range, assuming that there was a bomber build. So I got some really good vision in the top left. We see that copter, so that's going to get picked off for free. And our counterattack here is looking really good. Because we have so much stuff down here, we've kind of lulled our opponent into a false sense of security in the top left. But actually, we've been reinforcing this pretty heavily ever since we got the Neo tank here. And now it's time for us to stop pretending that we're weak. And so, yeah, we just blew up everything on that side. Total infantry massacre. And again, even though we've won the fight pretty convincingly, look at our army position. We're not extended very far out on the map. Like, this is the middle of the map, right? Look how many units we have over the center of the map. Like 1, 2, 3 with the Neotank, but the Neotank's not going to end up there. So this is part of good strategy. We managed to win a really crushing fight, and at the same time, all of our stuff is still on our side of the map. So positioning, really good, really important. There's an artillery in these woods. We kind of knew that was going to happen, but at this point, it's fine to just brawl, because we won the fight so convincingly that we can get away with it. And you'll see now is my turn to block rock. Because we got the power first, we had some charge left over so that when we're building the meter back up, now I've filled up my meter more quickly than my opponent, and so now this is going to hurt. That Neotank has now eaten 3 tanks, so that Neotank has already paid for itself completely, essentially. So we leave the Neotank on a city. We are anticipating that that Neotank is going to die to a bomber. But at this point, it's okay. And we are leaving this anti-air in range of the Neotank in case that happens. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Always got the backup plan. And we're setting up for a HQ cap. Shifting, like, we don't really actually care about taking this corner back. We can just consolidate control over here, and we've got the artillery to burn this lander now. And we can go end, as they say. So we're yeeting pretty hard here, but because we won the fight so convincingly before, yeeting is acceptable at this point. The counter block rock happens. There's the bomber. But at this point, our advantage is far too severe to be overcome. We can kind of clear out everything around the HQ. We've got our infantry there, and we begin the HQ capture. And that's the end. Okay, so day 19, HQ cap, pretty fun game. I thought the decisive turn, turn 14, right? Yeah, this, day 14 for me. That was a really cool play. I think that's a little bit unintuitive, but finding the opportunities, that's what you got to do if you want to be a top player. So pretty cool turn. Let's go to the beginning really quickly. We'll kind of blast through this thing real fast on full vision. So I was thinking that it was a tank up here, but it was actually just a single recon. So that kind of threw me off, but ended up not really making a huge difference. So you can see it was really good that I retreated this turn, because look at all this stuff. Like, if I had tried to fight here, I would have gotten absolutely smashed. And the way we took this fight was just really, really, really solid. Kind of unlucky this turn we didn't see the bomber, because we didn't have any recons, but the game was so far gone at this point that I didn't really try to fish for it. by sending units in deep to try and see if I can find the bomber. Even though you could kind of tell by his positioning. Oops. You could tell by the positioning of the tanks this turn that he had the bomber deployed, because like he put this tank like in vision, but actually this tank is covered by the bomber. So you can kind of I was assuming that there was a bomber just because of the tank positioning there. But yeah, so that's the end. That's round one. Looking forward to seeing some more good games on this map from the other tournament games. I really do enjoy this map. I think there's a lot to it. Normally I'm not a fan of semi-fog, but this map has a lot going for it, and there's a lot of intriguing little quirks for it. So with that said, I hope I will have some good games from the rest of this tournament. Hopefully I'll make a decent run. Last tournament didn't go so great for me, but I learned a lot from that, and we're going to try and put those lessons to use in the later rounds of this one. So with that said, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.